Detroit is different, still in effect here at the Just League Conference. We're talking diversity, equity, inclusion, all from New Detroit. And now I'm sitting with Andre at United Way. Andre, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
Good. This conference and what that means. And then definitely this will be the first time I'm actually pitching the question from a lens, knowing that you're a fellow podcaster, black man in this space. What does it mean as a black man to be, from that lens at a conference about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, from my position, I believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion is just a new branding of social justice and social action work. And so if you look at that, a lot of time when you talk about resilience, rebuilding, or healing our communities, there have been black men and women at the helm of those charges. Even some of the workshops that we saw here at the conference, when we talk about allyship and co-conspiratorship, it's really the burden of those who have been marginalized or harmed by systemic oppression to lift their voice, to raise their voice, and to really take the charge of creating equitable change. So for me, it's a familiar position. I stand on the shoulder of giants in this chair. I come as one, but I stand and sit here as 10,000. So really just it's incumbent upon me from my ancestral roots to my civil rights roots to my familial roots to really keep the charge going and represent those and creating a space behind me so that the leg of the race that I run would make it more advantageous, not necessarily easier, but definitely better for those that will follow.
And the reason, like I say, I'm gonna explore and open this onion a little bit more, just as a podcaster, because black men. I'm a black man too, so I recognize what's happening in these places and spaces. When we think about employment and education, our presence it's not there in a lot of industries. Entrepreneurship, definitely, we're present there often, but seeking jobs, education, we're often not in that space. What do you think is one of the blockades where just representation is so low when it comes to black men in those spaces?
Well, when you think about the systemic engineering of how it is set up, it is not really constructed for our success. When you talk about, Detroit, one of the blackest cities in the nation, and when you think about, I just heard a statistic about kids coming out of school, particularly African-American males, you're talking about less than 8% of the students totally that are graduating are actually prepared to enter the workforce and be competitive and or matriculate to a university. So you take the 8% of total students, and then you think about the disciplinary actions that are statistically higher against black males. You talk about the exclusion rate and suspension rates. It starts at a very early age when you talk about the third grade reading law and literacy. And so it really goes back to, education and how black males are generally marginalized, not prepared for these opportunities that exist. And then for those that are prepared, we go in and have to shoulder the burden of representing the entire race, right? And so a lot of times there's a suppression of identity. Not able to enter and participate in the workforce authentically as our full black selves. And for those of us who are courageous enough to do that, or spaces that would accommodate our full selves, there's generally a learning process to navigate those corporate structures, right? So you think about how corporate structures are set up is traditionally dominated by white males, and there are within that. I saw this quote. It was talking about the hidden dimensions of being able to be a co-conspirator from a white male perspective, but from a black male perspective, we go in knowing that it's going to be a battle. We know knowing that it's going to be a fight. And my mentor years ago told me, and he worked 42 years at Forward, and he missed less than 22 days in those 42 years. And he used to tell me, he said, Andre, and this is experience now, 42 years ago, he said, you have to essentially be over-prepared to replace within the corporate structure the least prepared.
That's powerful. With that, how do you feel that information like this getting to us, getting to other black men, especially even at a younger age, how is it empowering for us to know this? And then when we do find out, and when we do get the game, as I always say, what do we do with it? Where do we go with this game after we get it to empower us all?
So the next steps are taking action, right? Developing very strategic partnerships and collaborations, being willing to listen. I was listening to a message this morning. It was talking about knowing when you have authority and knowing how to convert your authority to empowerment for someone else. And so it's not about the fear of when we sit in positions of authority like I sit now, of closing that door and saying, oh, this is just for me, I've made it, but knowing how to strategically help other people get in positions. For instance, let me talk just briefly about some of the work of United Way, is that we rolled out in the last year a racial equity fund, which we invested $1 million to BIPOC-led organizations. And so those organizations have been traditionally underfunded, under-resourced, or not funded, right? And they had unique programming that really reached those black folks, brown folks that are in closest proximity to the expressed inequity. And so what we end up doing is understanding that you must convert your privilege into empowerment. When I find myself in positions and there are black women leading, I feel like it is my personal responsibility to support those initiatives with my full effort, right? Because that is what is the feasible thing to do. It is the good idea to do it, but it's also saying if we open these doors for more people like us, black and brown folks, to sit in positions of authority, we must steward it well. I was talking to my son, and I'll use the sports analogy just to bring it home. His team, they're on the winning streak now, so let me put that on the record.
Okay.
But they were losing, and he was in the game, and so he complained about his other teammates and complained about the loss. And so I asked him, I said, with the minutes you had on the field, what did you do? I said, so before you get ready to complain about what someone else is not doing, what did you do with your time on the field? And it's one of those things where we realize that a lot of times we have to take the time that we have, the opportunity we have, maximize it, and then also teach. So it's one of those, that bifurcated goal of, yes, accomplishing, but also instructing, right? So that's what you have to do when you get in that space. And I mean, you're talking to a guy who has invested 10 years, a decade in social work, another decade in education. So that teaching, that training, that educating, that equipping, that I learned from being also in ministry, it's just like you have that. I'm teaching every day. I'm training every day. I'm looking for talent. I'm looking for young men I can invest in, because that's how I ensure that the future is bright, not because I'm looking at this potential, which is really underutilized work, right? Underutilized scope or capacity. It's really me saying, I'm going to ensure that the future is bright by investing and finding a safe place to pour all that I know.
That's deep. Thank you so much.